Sponsored by the Dunleary Rattown Local Enterprise Office. You're listening to Business Eye on Dublin South FM.
Good afternoon and welcome to another Business Eye Friday. Yes, myself and Simon are looking at each other. It's Simon, do you know it's like looking at you through a window now? It's no longer Zoom, it's just I'm looking at you through a window each and every week. So how are you? How's your week been?
It's good. It feels like about 3 days, not 7 days, but no, it's been good and busy-ish. And I can't believe it's the end of January already. So I don't think many people will miss January 2021. So here comes February anyway.
Here comes February, the shortest month of the year. This week we want to speak about the impact of lockdown has on small businesses. And one of our guests is Wendy Merrigan, and she's going to be coming on later on. But who have we got today to start off today with?
Yeah, so we have a very special, important guest, Neil McDonnell, who is the chief executive at ISME, the Irish Small Medium Enterprise Organisation, and he's been chief executive now, I think, for 5 or 6 years, 5 years at least, and has a background in the Irish Defence Forces, the petroleum industry, and since joining ISME, Neil has been especially active in a number of issues around insurance, cost for small business, Irish indigenous industrial policy, and I've heard you, Neil, quite a few times on the media, and I love the way that you say it as it should be said in terms of advocating for the SME sector. I mean, my business is an SME, is a small business, and it's the backbone of every capitalist economy, and particularly in Ireland. And I think it really, really needs a strong advocate such as ISME, and you're doing a fantastic job. So welcome, Neil.
Thanks, Simon.
Welcome, Neil, to the show. Neil, do you feel that you're becoming a bit of a celebrity on the airwaves, the way the world has changed?
It certainly, the amount of media interaction has really stepped up since COVID, and I'm glad to hear Simon's remarks about us. The one thing that we most proudly show of ourselves is our independence. So our message to the small business community, to society, is not constrained by big members, large companies or anything like that. For our National Council, who set the policy that you hear me voice, it's one man, one woman, one vote. You don't get 2 votes or 3 votes by having a larger turnover. And those people are willing to take one for the team. There are many policy issues we advocate on that aren't actually in the interests of all the SMEs on our National Council or indeed our membership, but people have a collective understanding about what's good for society.
One of the things that sparks is that small businesses are the lifeblood of this country. One of the things which I get slightly upset about is that, people kind of go, oh, we're flying and the economy are there. And it's like Amazon are doing extremely well at the moment. And I sort of say to people, Amazon didn't hire you when you were 18. You went to your local shop when you were 18. You went down to the local shop and you had a laugh, or there were that connection with the old person, with society, and there's that community. And even though we're all online and there is some businesses doing well online, the smaller business, that brick and mortar, the stuff that we grew up with is disintegrating. It's being destroyed.
Yeah, and I don't want to bore your listeners with the figures, but the simple reality is that the only tax subhead that the multinationals beat the SMEs on is, and you would have guessed it, on corporation tax. But on all other areas in the productive economy, and that's the economy minus the public service and the semi-state sector, the employment in the small business sector makes up more than half of the tax take. It's 55% of tax and PRSI, and it's 2/3. It's around 65% of VAT. So, and the really scary figure actually is it's 75%, 74% of employment in the productive sector. So, if the SME sector catches a cold, and not to strain the analogy, but society is really going to get the flu. It is that serious for us.
But looking at household spending, we know that supermarkets have jumped up. There's an increase in hardware stores, the price, the percentage there, and in supermarkets. But household spending has to have dropped.
Yeah, it is strange. We have had so that there are a number of conflicting things here. The central bank will show that household savings are ballooning. They are being supported by the state, but there's a number of artificial things going on at the moment. So first of all, our tax system is highly progressive, and as you go, as earnings trend down to 25,000 and below, the tax system actually takes very little off you by comparison to what it does on the continent. And therefore, you have the government and the exchequer looking at the figures and saying, well, PAYE is holding up. And it's holding up because a lot of people in the non-essential sector are capable of working from home and maintaining productivity, as we three lucky gents are on this call. But there is a really significant cohort of lower paid employees that are effectively subsisting on state handouts at the moment. So on the one hand, yes, there is pent up demand to spend, and that's represented in central bank deposits. But on the other hand, there's another cohort of people who have lost a job, they're on state benefits, and it is going to take a long time to for the economy to sort them out.
Neil, what about the psyche of the small and medium business owner? I mean, my hairdresser here in Churchtown, just a great guy, and it's open, it's closed, it's open, it's closed. I mean, it's kind of like a form of torture, when you look at it objectively. How are you seeing the psyche of whether you're seeing this through surveys, through your membership? Because it's not easy. It's the lack of certainty is one of the hardest things for everybody.
Yeah, we have been surveying sentiment. This stuff is objectively very hard to measure, but we have been surveying sentiment amongst the SME community since May. And obviously, sentiment was very low. It was on the floor at the time of the first lockdown, and it improved during the summer. It declined again then in September, but it elevated again at Christmas. And we're just about to issue the next one, and I think that's going to show a decline in sentiment again. So you're absolutely right, Simon. Sentiment follows, it very closely follows the activity in the economy. I think the common theme, of course, businesses would love to be open, but they recognize that they can't be. But what is extremely frustrating for them is, I've been on calls with the Irish Scientific Advisory Group. Sometimes we have been accused of, saying throw the economy open and free for all. And even some of the scientists on the Scientific Advisory Group said, your press releases, we could have written some of them. But what we're saying is we would rather absorb the pain now, but have a clear plan for how we're getting out of this. A lot of what's happening at the moment is a matter of extreme frustration, and continuous lockdowns are simply just not the way to go.
Just touching back on, some of the revenue losses to local businesses due to lockdown. And we were talking there earlier on that 2 and 5 micro-sized firms and 1 and 2 small, medium-sized firms face a revenue shortfall between March and June of last year, was about between 6 and 10 billion. That's an awful lot of money that's going in and out of the exchequer.
Of course it is. And when you look at, again, we do spend an awful lot of our time citing very boring figures, but even those parts of the SME demography where you have lower skilled workers who they're not making IT sector earnings, but they are in gainful employment, and by virtue of that, they are not a burden on the state. So what people don't realize is that even someone who's making 25 or 30,000 euros a year, firstly, they are making a contribution to society. They are not a burden on the social fund or the exchequer. They're making a contribution in terms of USC, PRSI, and PAYE, but they're also making a contribution in terms of VAT as spending members of society. So the swing, the revenue swing against the state, when you take that person out of even a job in a barbershop or behind the counter in a shop, in a convenience store, when you remove that person from that employment, and then you add in just a standard job seekers allowance, which is to 103 euros a week, that costs 10,500 euro per person per annum, before we start talking about the elevated rates we have at the moment under the PUP. So the swing against the state coffers as a result of this is absolutely massive.
What about sorry, Joe, just something that I hadn't thought about before, but obviously you hear about the tech sector doing well and supermarkets, etc. But I just have this perception that nearly all SMEs are struggling. But is that really the case, or are there any subsectors within the SME sector that are doing okay or even excelling? Or are there none? I mean, just out of interest.
No, it certainly isn't across the board. And we have some of the professional service providers are actually doing very well. The other thing we see is that while we have complained that the debt solutions available from government at the moment, the SBCI loans, the Brexit loans, the credit guarantee scheme, demand for those has been exceptionally low. However, one package that is of interest because it's structured around businesses that are restructuring, the Future Growth Loan Fund has been doing very well, and we have just issued our Bankwatch survey yesterday, and you'll see it on social media today, but that is proving very popular. Now, when I've asked some of the accountants in our membership what's behind that, they say that there are actually a lot of SMEs that came into this recession in a healthy state. They have a healthy balance sheet, and they are now looking at expansion or acquisition. So, I know it's really bad news for some of those businesses that are going to not make it through this, but it's almost a process of rapid natural selection. And we are going to have a cohort in certain sectors that are actually going to be healthier as a result of this.
The one thing as well, that if there are industries that are doing well, and we look at the industry themselves, but we know the people that are working in those industries, because they're working at home and because of lockdown, they're suffering mentally. There's all these other issues that are appearing. The silent issue that I'm grand, but behind the scenes in that family unit, and we have the statistics to show that as well. One thing
Joe, one thing I would say to you on that, because that's very important. When people ring us up for information, it's normally very transactional, and you're directing them into websites. And you're saying, well, if you want to claim this, you go here, and the tax relief on that is there. And when you transmit that information, people go, yeah, okay, thank you. In the last 6 or 7 months, it is very evident that when you transmit that information, the other person doesn't want to get off the phone. and you know that what they're not actually information seeking. They're sitting in a room on their own. They have no one else to talk to, and there are things going on that are beyond the commercial. So so you may have seen a lot of our output in the last number of months has included the links to the mental health advice services of the HSE, simply because we are going, these people actually need to be getting help that is not available, unfortunately, from ISME. So that's a very important comment to make.
Like, look at the statistics at the moment. The statistics are just, there was 3,450 women and 589 children contacted domestic violence services for the first time, and an average of 1,920 women and 411 children received support from domestic violence services every month. And the calls that are coming in it's an average of 184 calls a day. These are the underlying issues with lockdown. When we look at lockdown, we look at a virus, but the elephant in the room is all this other stuff that's there that it's going to cause a lot more damage in the long run on it. And one of the things that I was sort of mulling over my head today before I came on, we're all in business, and for a company to do well, we look at what everyone else is doing and we try and do it differently. But we look at all the governments are looking at the same thing and they're all doing the same thing. I haven't seen one government go, everyone else is trying this and it's not working. And, recession is coming, like in England, they reckon it's going to be devastated there. But could we not have a government going, okay, everyone else is trying this and it's not working. Let's try this and see if this works. Like Sweden or,
Finland or New Zealand or Australia or Taiwan.
Yeah.
I understand what you're asking, Joe. I suppose one of the reasons we have made a conscious decision at council level among ISME not to second guess the government advice in those areas is to avoid what the Americans call the Monday morning quarterback syndrome, where it's very easy to be dispensing advice, and especially in areas where you know nothing about. The only area where we have become quite vocal in the lead up to Christmas is, and it's not that we're suggesting we know better than NPHET or the government, but what we have been doing is relying on the information coming out from the WHO, from the EU Commission, and from our own HICWA about the other sorts of measures that government should be taking. And specifically, we have been saying in those workplaces that are essential, we should be doing rapid antigen testing on people in those workplaces. And now we see today that it's going to happen, but only because the only way the French will let in our truckers is if they pass an antigen test. So
that's going true.
It's frustrating.
We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. And when we come back, we're going to listen to Wendy Merrigan. And
you're listening to Business Eye, sponsored by your local enterprise office in Dunleary Rathdown. Together, we're making it happen.
Yes, folks. And as I was just saying on the show there, one of our guests couldn't make it in today. So I interviewed her yesterday. And I asked her some questions, and I think the questions are very important. As I say, the impact of lockdown on small businesses, but also from a financial point of view, and especially with the revenue and people trying to do their returns and just the mindset as well. So I have Wendy Merrigan on the line. So Wendy, look, this week's show, we're talking about the impact on small business with lockdown. You are in the trenches, you're dealing with a lot of companies out there. What are your thoughts and what are you hearing back from your clients in this lockdown, which probably is the hardest out of all the lockdowns?
Yeah, I think people are definitely finding this one harder. It's one thing when businesses are closed, but when it impacts the schooling is when it's having a massive impact on business owners. So doing normal day-to-day work while trying to look after your children. Now, I don't have children, Joe, but this is what I'm hearing from clients. And especially, we've just had tax filings. We're going to come up against filings for CRO in the next month. So everything that potentially should only take a short bit of time, add in homeschooling, add in, the government system's not working properly, and they're saying that it's due to homeschooling and level 5 issues, but they're not extending deadlines on the other side for business owners.
What can you elaborate on, what systems are down within the government?
Yeah, so for example, last week, Friday the 22nd, we were due to do VAT filings for annual return of trading details for businesses. And the system wasn't ready for the VAT change that happened, the 21%. So a lot of people tried to force in incorrect details, but the revenue only sent out a notification on Friday evening to say that we had an extension up to March to file that return, which again is very unfair. Bookkeepers, accountants, tax people trying to file things. And literally we're getting notified at the last minute that it's okay that these things, can be pushed out a bit. But for anybody who needs to work ahead of time and has a lot to deal with, that pressure is massive. Another one is the CRO's website. So the new introduction of the site was to be all singing, all dancing from mid-December, which was brilliant because we were looking forward to the fact that the system was going to be made easier. In December, so we all came back then January, and there's a lot of glitches on the system. There's a lot of new things to learn. There's a lot of little tweaky things. Filing a small return might have taken 10 minutes before, and now, the system is just slow. It can stop. We don't know what's wrong. We're trying to figure it out. There's just so many small things that are taking longer.
It's a new learning curve on it.
We only have until the 26th of February, though, right? So we had this 9-week period that we would have had, to get things done with the new system. So this is now getting shorter and shorter. So now we have like 5 weeks, and the CRO said, bear with us, until we can actually get through some of these issues. We're trying to fix them. And in the meantime, they haven't extended out our deadline on the other side.
I do know with the revenue as well, we have to give credit to the revenue. If there is an issue or someone is having a concern and you pick up the phone and have a chat with them, they understand and they do work out plans with people. Yes. And that is the good thing. Years ago when you rang the revenue, you were terrified. Now I have to admit there's a human element to the revenue, and that is the nice thing of it.
Yeah.
What's the likes of local rates for small businesses that are paying rates and that have been closed for X amount of time? Do they still have to pay those rates, or is there a hold on them?
There is a hold on those, yeah. But again, some of the incentives or, the grants that are there, they don't apply to every business, some businesses are paying rent and the rates might be included. So if the landlord doesn't agree to a reduced rate, rates, then that's no benefit to the business owner. It's been mixed between landlords given some kind of break to their tenants and some being taken a very harsh line. I know everybody has debt to pay, and I know everybody has their liabilities, but it is
the mortgages and everything as well.
That go with that. Yeah.
Also, then, what have we learned over the last 12 months that we can apply to the next 12 months and get it right?
So a lot of people have taken a new direction with their business or have done stuff online. We know that. And this time, immediately when level 5 was introduced, we had a lot less queries than previous times, which is fine. The joy this time was Brexit kicking in January as well. So businesses having that on top of it. But what we learned, people are just resilient. They're going to keep on pushing through when they can and prioritize what's important. Try to stay focused. We had a chat before about goals and whether or not somebody can stay on track with what they hope to achieve this year. When I talk to people, we can still take control of that and we can still have a plan for the future. And it is just digging deep on our reserves of resilience. Absolutely.
Just as human beings, we're resilient. We are.
Yeah.
There is those elements that causes a lot of fear and anxiety. A lot of people have lost their jobs. There's no denying that, if you're in a household, in a house in Dublin, and you've been put on a pandemic payment and your mortgage, there's people out there, their mortgage are $2,000 a month and all the other stuff. There's a weight on their shoulders that this is all building, and they're the losers. They really are the losers on it.
Yeah.
It's a question that I'm asking everyone today, and I'll ask it to you. Who are the winners out of 2020?
It is the K economy. I can see online doing so well. So with retail closing, online sales for Irish businesses is through the roof. And I think there at Christmas, when everybody got really focused on where they were buying their gifts from, everybody focused on buying Irish, thankfully. And so those Irish businesses did really well. And others, by changing what they do and how they operate, they've surprised themselves on what they can do. So instead of thinking local and having a premises, taking certain things online has given them a worldwide audience now, which is taken off for their businesses. So yeah, it's just amazing what has come out of this as well. I know it's awful for everybody that's lost their job, but it is a case of trying to make the most of what we have.
Me, I got a gift voucher from Amazon, and if you're buying anything from England now, there's going to be a charge. Like I bought at the Amazon and it was €32 and there was €8 on top of it because it was buying it from England. Now just got another €8 on top of it. And that's going to be on everything over the certain thresholds in the UK that people go, hang on, let me see if I can buy that in Ireland now. And
yeah. And they are going to be the winners, thankfully. Yeah. And other EU countries. You can see people really pay attention to where they're ordering from now. And it is like the postman's showing up with the credit card and the credit card machine for people to pay for their purchases, which they weren't expecting. Nobody wants that. Nobody.
No, definitely not. But look, that's it. Leave us with one tip.
If you're struggling, I'd say talk to revenue. Like you said, they are very open. We find that hard because we're talking for a lot of people, but if you do talk directly to them, you will get a considerate response. Definitely. Yeah.
Wendy, thanks for coming on. So if anyone wants to catch you, it's on wendymerrigan.ie and you'll be able to share lots of wisdom and advice with them on it. Thank you for coming on. It was Wendy. Would you agree with what she has to say? That a lot of people are buying more Irish now than they were buying from the UK, especially with Brexit and stuff.
I was fascinated with that, Joe, because I just had a conversation this week with one of our affiliated organisations among the jewellers, and interestingly, they weren't shy about saying, I know I spoke to one jeweller. He said he'd had the best Christmas in 40 years. And he said what was interesting was that the city centre jewellers in Dublin weren't doing well, but the suburban jewellers in Dublin and the regional jewellers in the country reported that people were buying local and they were making a real effort to buy Irish. So they've done very well. They are obviously very keen now that ahead of Valentine's Day, because of course they're now shut down again. So we're there another group of shopkeepers that just have had to close the doors. But if they can maintain an online presence and if they're permitted to do some click and collect, because especially with bespoke jewellery, for example, people are reluctant to buy online. We could rescue something from this. But yes, of course, we have to face the fact that there are some winners and losers in this.
I get annoyed because I went down to the Tesco's to buy my shopping and I couldn't buy a pair of socks because it wasn't classed as, an essential item. So I'm sitting here with a hole in my sock,
Yeah. And I don't want to get negative here, but one thing to add to this mix is the dreaded B word, the Brexit. And, this is superimposed on all this soup of confusion and chaos and whatever. And, I'll be a bit outspoken here. As an SME owner, I get the impression that some politicians and policy makers think that we've got nothing better to do than read arcane policies and directives and stuff. Whereas if I'm a florist in Ireland, I just need to know, what are the things I need to know from a Brexit perspective that are relevant to my business, and what are the things I need to action? Or if I'm a coach or a consultant in Ireland, what are the things that are not relevant to me? And I think that's what ISME seems to do well. It seems to interpret the complex arcane things and give the answers as best as it can. I mean, SMEs just need the answers, right? Would you agree with that, Neil?
Yeah, well, we really do try. And I think, to be absolutely fair to everyone, you have to remember that, Brexit has been a real shock to the SME system in particular. We didn't get the green light on a deal until Christmas Eve. And it was an extremely skinny deal. It was a free trade agreement only, but people have associated a free trade deal with meaning that there would be, or they've conflated that with the notion of there being no cost to this. But the UK has left the single market and it has left the customs union. So it is commercially more distant from us now than Iceland, Norway, Switzerland, or Turkey. And that has huge consequences. And only this morning I was dealing with our Irish Bakers Association, and they're looking at significant increases in the price of bread from March, April onwards, simply because of the amount of flour we buy from the UK. But SMEs are hugely dependent on the UK to import from and to export to. Our bigger companies export much more globally and into continental Europe, but the small businesses tend to be very focused on Britain. And it's you can't click your fingers overnight and have a French market or an Italian market. That really does take time, and they have not had time to do it, so they're really suffering at the moment.
So we know with Brexit that Flanders have opened up a lot of new channels, and Spain have opened up a new channels as well. But there's still the logistics and still the shipping. I don't think there's enough ships to get us across, and that is changing. But just I want to just revert back to lockdown and into Ireland. What is your idea, or what is your belief that what we need to do over the next couple of months to get this sorted, and so that we're prepared for a year, 2 years down the road, that we survive as a country?
That's a really important thing to focus on, Joe, from our point of view, because what we don't want to see is that we get our caseload per 100,000 down below the 1,000 again, get it to a few hundred, and then we blob along with a semi-open market in level 2 or level 3 restrictions, and then we're faced with the same figures again. I have to say, and I availed of the opportunity at Christmas to go out for a dinner with friends, and it was just a couple of guys in a restaurant that was, doing everything they could to maintain social distance and another hygiene. But when I was walking around town, I have to say I was appalled by what I saw, and I was not surprised at all with the figures that emerged. So we are going to have to maintain, you will have seen in every email we send now that we have the government hygiene and social distancing advice. But what we're saying is, when we get these figures down, we cannot rely purely on lockdown as our only tool and the vaccine. So we have said, and we recognize that there are workplaces that have to be open now, where we said we have to have rapid antigen testing in those workplaces, paid for by the government when they come back. And I don't know about you, I have a parent in a nursing home. I want to see the workers in that nursing home tested every single day. That's possible with antigen testing. Gardaí who have to come into work should be tested every single day. Our health workers in our hospitals should be tested every single day. When our schools open in the second week of March now, it looks like, those teachers should be tested every single day in order to protect them, but also in order to protect us, so that we can really rapidly isolate anyone who is symptomatic or infected and send them home for 2 weeks. And that's how you kill this virus. You don't do it by letting us concertina in and out of lockdown every couple of months. It's insane.
Can I ask a question? Statistic-wise, for all this, when we were in lockdown, and the only place that we're actually going to is supermarkets, Dunn's, Tesco, Aldi, and so on. What is the rate of infection in the staff of all these supermarkets? Is it high? Is it low? Because that's where everyone's congregating.
To be fair, the HSE is publishing those epidemiological figures weekly with a 14-day look back. And it is those figures that we look at. And obviously, look, we have an interest in this because we represent members who are in those sectors of trade. But retail transmission and transmission in the grooming industry has been negligible. It has been 0.3 of 1% in retail and grooming settings, respectively. And yet they are shut down. Meanwhile, we have allowed large public congregations to take place over Christmas in other settings. So this is the absence of joined up thinking. We're 10, almost 11 months into this now. People are adult and mature enough to be told, we can relax some of our sectors, but these are the things you cannot do from here on in.
Yeah, Neil, you mentioned a lack of joined up thinking. And, I heard earlier today that places like Finland, New Zealand, Australia, China, Taiwan, pretty much zero COVID. And then the Biden administration last week announces, I haven't read it, but it seems to be a comprehensive strategy, right? And I spend my day listening to talk radio, and I've not once in 10, 11 months heard or seen or been pointed to an Irish strategy for Ireland. Is there a strategy?
I suppose, and again, you're getting into an area where we are reluctant to start telling people with greater expertise than us. But one thing we said very early on is that NEFIT, which is, and we've never criticized the individual members of NEFIT who are, very well-meaning people, but they are, to a man and woman, they are fully paid civil servants. So they don't have an exposure, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but they are not afflicted with the real life considerations that affect everyone else. That, December was bad. I could go to the ATM. I will not have any money. Now, that is not going to affect people who are every member of that team is paid between 100 and 150,000 euros a year. So we need to have an injection of, we're not saying open up the economy and let it rip, but what we are saying is, if you have people who can go into that room and say, we can safely operate in the following way. We represent, for instance, a lot of people in the grooming business who've spent a huge amount of money getting their premises safe for punters to come in who can't at the moment. But what we know is happening in the meantime is that their employees are now working in the grey economy, and they're going into people's houses and they're doing their hair without use of proper equipment or sterilization or anything like that. So there are unintended consequences from having people who have this sort of statist, corporatist, civil service mindset as the exclusive mediators of how we deal with this COVID crisis.
There was one thing that I noticed, and it was pointed out to me by a taxi man actually in the first COVID, that the underworld never slept. When everyone else was locked down, the underworld was the one to keep going. And now what's happened is there's a grey world appearing as well. some people in the business world that we speak to have said to me they're annoyed with the government, and the reason because the task force that is there to help the economy push forward has no business people in it, and they would love to see more the likes of yourself and other people from different sectors getting involved for that greater think tank, and that's where the frustration is on it. I know that the WHO said they were going to change the settings on the PCR this week. I think it was last week, and because they said that I think they said it was a slight fault in it. I believe that if that setting is changed, you're going to see less numbers. And the reason being because of I've spoken to people that when you're shoving it up the nose and back into the throat, as the joke has said, if you're looking for gold, you'll find it. But because they're changing the calibration, we probably might see less numbers coming through as well. So that might be a good sign. I think we're all just frustrated. We are genuinely. Ireland has saints and scholars, but we are genuinely frustrated. And I think the one thing that we need to do is unite, because there is a huge divide going on. Against and for in the country. There's families falling out. There's people who are actually terrified. There's some people that I know that haven't left their house for 6-7 months. And, how do we, moving forward, how do you feel that we unite the country? And again, I'll ask you, and what we've learned from the last 12 months for the next 12 months?
I think this is a bit like any form of crisis management, and perversely, I think Ireland is reasonably good at crisis management, back to the wall stuff. What we're actually very bad at is steady state management of normality. So what we have been saying all along, very consistently, is that now when we're in lockdown, we need a clearly communicated message about what the expectation of society will be, how the government will regulate this. And it can be done, for instance, by setting an expectation around the caseload per 100,000 and say, if we maintain it at this, then these are the measures we will take in public. If it goes above this, then we will take more stringent measures. When you do that, you can get people used to what needs to be done. But we also need to, again, we've consistently said, we have been speaking on WHO advice, that the key to this is not persistent lockdown. It is test, trace, isolate, and control. We know we can't trace now when the caseload is as high as it is, but when we get it down, we want people who do have to go to a workplace to be tested in that workplace. If they're symptomatic or if they test positive, they should be sent home. And we should be doing that throughout society in all essential workplaces. And then obviously it's a matter of how fast the vaccine program rolls out. But we should be communicating that now, while we're in lockdown, not on the 5th or 6th of March.
Yeah, and I mean, Neil, I mean, you're the voice of reason. I mean, you talked about that privileged, secluded class that doesn't. We're not criticizing them, but they do need to listen to the grassroots Irishman and Irishwoman, and then you mentioned the need for this clear, steady strategy and not wait for that crisis. And for me, you've summed it up perfectly, and you say it in a respectful way. But I think we need to hear politicians saying this more in this respectful, positive, creative, innovative way, and that's my hope.
More, Simon, and hopefully that does take off. The unfortunate, I mean, within the political sphere, there are people who are trying to catastrophize this for their own personal gain, for their political profile. But we do need calm and rational heads, and I'm glad to say we have a good number of those as well, advocating for what you've just said.
I always believe it's not the organization. You can't blame an organization. It's sometimes it's a small amount of people or a person that gives an organization a bad name or makes a bad call. So there is good people. I say, people are pointing at the government screaming. there are good people in the government. There are good politicians. There are, people that want us to get out of this and are in it genuinely for the citizens of the country and not for their own agenda. I honestly believe that there is good people, and they will shine through. They will shine through on it.
I'd agree, Joe, and I would say also that people have an immense capacity to bear bad news if you tell them very straight. And if you don't attempt to sugar the pill every time, but you have to have a plan for what comes afterwards. So if people are told we're in the worst, bar the initial 2 weeks back in March of last year, we're in the worst form of lockdown we've seen so far. So if people are given a set of objective goals that can be achieved if we can maintain low numbers, and the government will enjoy quite a lot of freedom from the citizenry to really flatten the curve in an aggressive way, but the government in return has to show a really clear path out of this that does not involve sequentially closing down business.
I would agree. Look, the three things I say to people, lateral thinking, really important. It's think for yourself and question everything. And there's a bit of truth in everything as well. If people just sort of follow those guidelines, I think we'll be all right. Thanks for coming on, and we hope that you'll come on the show again. So there you have it, Simon. There you have it. What's your thoughts on the whole thing? What's your thoughts?
Oh, well, I think Wendy was excellent, and she gave her views from a practitioner's perspective, and there's all sorts of confusion. But I think you're right. I think, most people are trying their hardest. I mean, dare I say, even politicians and policy makers and people in, the tax environment and the company office, I think they are. And then my big takeout from Neil was that, he speaks a lot of good truth, right? I mean, he's not lambasting I think he talked about, the secluded, privileged class of policymakers and politicians. Again, most of them are trying their hardest, but I think what he hit it on the head where he said that we need to get away from this reactive way of doing things in Ireland. And it's not just Ireland, and use this time now to be forward thinking the strategy. And I don't know whether that's being done enough. So, yeah, but I'm an optimist, Joe.
Like it is indeed. Just going back there as well. We mentioned supermarkets are up 7%, hardware, painting and glass are up 9%, and specialist food stores are up 11%.
Yeah.
So, there is the good. You have to look at the good and the bad out of it. There's one thing that is scratching my head on this whole COVID thing, and I'm just going to give you these figures. This is to do with the deaths in Ireland over the last couple of years. So look at, say, 2017, there was 30,140 deaths. That was 6.3% of the economy. Then there was, in 2018, it was 31,116. In 2019, it was 31,134. And then in 2020, it was 22,416. Now, these figures are coming from the CSO. So looking at all the years, and with a pandemic in 2020, the death rates had dropped. It doesn't make sense.
Nobody talks about this, and convert. So there's, I'm not diminishing COVID. It's real, and it's been tragic for many people.
It is, yeah.
But I don't hear enough people talking about, the mental illness that's being generated as a result of the severity of the lockdown and the fact, as you said, in real terms, according to these numbers, there's been a real drop, right? Nobody's talking about this stuff. And you do wonder why there's this constant focus just on COVID. And we're not talking about mental health, and we're not talking about cancer and all this other stuff. Joe, why? Why do you think?
I believe that we're being NLP'd on mainstream TV. Fear sells, and unfortunately, we've known this before. During the recession, many years ago, people switched off because all it was bad news. I think there's a happier world out there, and I think if we unite as people and, you know, be a bit more thick-skinned and, you know, accept if someone doesn't agree with you or you don't agree with someone else. That's okay. Switch it off. Switch off the stuff. You know, there's a divide. I think we just have to love each other.
Yeah.
You know,
that's it. I agree. Yeah. I mean, let's face it, we've only got one go at this. And I that's the first time I've seen those numbers. I'm actually shocked that the overall deaths are down in 2020 compared to 2019.
Yeah.
I mean, why is this not being discussed? Anyway.
But look, we have some of the information that we've done on our research from the show, and that will be on the website as well today that people can pull up and have a look. And, you know, it's all about, as I said, don't take everything as face value, question everything, lateral thinking, and there's a bit of truth in everything. That's it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as you said, love, Joe. Love.
Folks, thanks for tuning in to Business Eye this week. And before we go, I just want to give a big shout out to everyone that's involved here at Dublin South FM. Peter Rice, the station manager, Patrick Keeley, who helps us with our research each and every week, and Simon as well, my co-host. And not forgetting all the engineers. So from ourselves here at Dublin South FM, have a great weekend, be safe and look after yourself.